Hey y'all, Bynx here, and welcome to Bynx Bants, the weekly series where we talk everything Marvel Snap, starting, as always, with our featured section, Cards You Forgot Were Broken. Marvel Snap has now been out for like 3.5 years if you count beta. Man, that's crazy to sound like 3 years and 8 months if you count beta. And cards have changed a ton. There were cards that were like released super early that looked very different. I actually talked about some of those before in a previous episode. But what I wanted to talk about is cards that just used to be insanely broken that people don't really think about anymore. So you might see some examples, or you might think to some examples, but those are generally the ones I'm trying to avoid. It's more ones that you don't really think about it, usually because they're older or maybe they weren't broken for very long. But I'm really excited. I have a bunch of honorable mentions as well. I was really stoked going through this, starting with the very first one, Elsa Bloodstone. This card was a monster when it got released. It was a 2/2. Says if you play another card to fill a location, give it +3 power. And one thing that's like always really held true in Marvel Snap is that once things start giving like +3, it starts to kind of become a problem. We're actually seeing it right now with Shu Lao giving +3, and a lot of people think that it might eventually get moved down to +2 power. And very similar to this, man, just a 2/2 that when you use things that can move, things like Kitty to be able to fill a lane. Back then, Angel was actually would go up by 2 when you would play a card there. So you can, not only buff cards that you're going to move and play elsewhere, but continue to buff that lane. It was devastating. There were tons of other cards that kind of like played a role in why this was so powerful when it was first released. But this deck was so hard to beat when it first came out. There was, people would play it with like Loki and just have this like way to just generate a bunch of power and move things around, and then Loki their hand, and then change whatever their opponent was doing. This card made like Vision C play because you just like on turn 5 stack a lane, get a little bit of power, get an 11 power Vision to be able to move somewhere, and then play your cards in different spots. That was when Shang-Chi was really popular back then, so having like a moving 11 power card was super strong. But boy, oh boy, what a monster of a card. They actually nerfed this very quickly to +2 power, pretty like within 3 weeks, actually. It was one of the fastest nerfs they've ever had to a season pass card. But this card was a monster when it came out. I don't think people really remember it because it was so like short-lived its period of being crazy, but this card was an absolute beast on release. Now, a card that I think about quite a bit more would be Mobius M. Mobius. Now, you might not like Mobius just like I do because it kind of like takes out and kind of strangles a lot of different ways to play Marvel Snap in just a single card. And that's tough, but to play a 3/3 nowadays, it's a pretty big investment. So, like playing Mobius, it feels a lot less bad than when this card released as a 2/3 with the same effect. This was ridiculous. I was so mad that they released this card when they did. It was everywhere. There was no reason not to put this in your deck. This was like over a year and a half ago, so the power level was quite a bit lower, and a 2/3 was just not that bad to just have this broken ability to be able to completely stop any plans for your opponent to do energy cheat, but also like protect yourself from things like Dream Dimension or Iceman or anything like that. Boy, oh boy, what a terrible mistake to drop this card as a 2/3. It was played in that Elsa deck. They would play like the 2/2 Luke Cage in it. You just play all these just random two drops that didn't really do much for you, but just stopped your opponent from being able to do anything. Was you gathered a bunch of power. Man, I hate Mobius now, but a lot of that might be trauma from when this card was a 2/3, and it was stupid not to put it in your deck. So many even if their opponent's game plan wasn't doing it, there's so many random locations like Elysium drops, and you could play this on one. You just play this on one, and you'd be like, "Hi, I have Sarah this game," and you don't. Man, dude, what a terrible mistake to release this card as a 2/3. I am much happier seeing it as a 3/3, but this card was absolutely broken on release. Moving on to a couple cards in the beta that were crazy. First off, Devil Dinosaur did the exact same thing it does now, but it was just a 3/0. Crazy, man. A 3/0 that could get +2 power for each card in your hand. So easy to make this a 3/10. And we're talking about beta days. 3.5 years of cards back then. This card would be insane now. Like back then, it was beyond broken. Such a powerful card. Moon Girl was 3/3 back then, so you could Moon Girl, and then on the final turn, play like 2 10-power Devil Dinosaurs. Just way stronger than anything else that you could do in the format back then. Maybe not stronger, though, than our final honorable mention, which was the original Nova, a 1 energy 2 power with the ability when this is destroyed, give your cards +2 power. So not only was it 1 extra power just in case you weren't able to destroy it, but it like double blue marveled your board. This card and Devil Dinosaur were just so much further ahead than any other cards that you can play. Pretty much every deck would run like Nova and Carnage, and then maybe like a Deathlock, or if you had it unlocked Venom, because back then it was actually even harder to get cards, which some people might think it sounds crazy, but it was way, way worse back then. Um, you just have all these ways to just buff up a ton of power, and then everything else just felt so terrible back then compared to this. That this was just way, way ahead. In the very first round of nerfs ever, they changed both Devil Dinosaur up to a 4/0 where it stayed for a while. And then they changed this to a 1/2 that gave +1 like it does now. And then they even nerfed it again later because it was just so powerful to just run like Killmonger and Nova in your deck that having it be just a 1/2 outside of it made it a little bit more annoying. But boy, oh boy, it is so fun. Like this card would be crazy now. And this was like when the power level was way worse, and it was just a Goliath compared to any of those other cards back then. Really, really interesting to think back to those first few months of Marvel Snap and how this card was just absolutely everywhere. You would just run armor as tech. Like every deck would run armor because every deck would run Nova Carnage. It was a very funny time to be a Marvel Snap player. Moving on, now we are at our top five. And the first one I think is really cool. It is Arrow. So Arrow was originally released as a 5/6, but then got buffed to a 5/8. But it has had this ability the whole time. On reveal, move all enemy cards played this turn to this location. So Arrow right now only moves the last card your opponent played, but whether they're revealed or unrevealed or anything, what Arrow used to do is take all of their cards that they played on that turn and move it to the lane that Arrow was in. Crazy, crazy, crazy powerful. You could use it to pretty much guarantee clog a lane on turn 5 if that's what you were trying to do. But a big thing to think about was that this was in like beta and right after the original release. Things were just a way slower. There wasn't all these ways to generate cards like Merlin and Kate Bishop. You didn't really play out nearly as many cards back then as you do now. So now it might not seem that crazy, but when there was just so much board space available, it basically was able to juggernaut both lanes of your opponent. Usually Juggernaut has been so powerful and it has been nerfed because you are able to stop them from playing in one lane. Well, this would stop your opponents from playing in 2 lanes very, very often. What a monster of a card. It's very funny that we were just bad at Marvel Snap back then. No one really played this card at first. This is the 5/6 version was originally in the game. They ended up buffing it up to 5/8 because no one was playing it. And then people started playing this card and they're like, whoa, my gosh, dude, this is completely unfair, being able to just completely like deny anything that your opponent was going to be able to do. You would get into these end games where your opponent was winning 2 lanes and you have space in the other lane. You just have to expect that they're just going to play Arrow, move all of your cards, and be able to win those other 2. Really, really strong, really powerful card. I wonder if they're going to change Arrow at some point. Arrow has always felt like this weird, not really used move card nowadays. So interesting to see if they ever do adjust it to make it a little bit more powerful, but definitely don't want to see, even today, again, it wouldn't be as powerful as it was back then because there's a lot more like board filling. But boy, oh boy, this card was an absolute nightmare. Moving on to number 4, and this one this is probably the one that I think will surprise people the most, which is Snow Guard. And you'll see the slide. It's a 1/2. It says on reveal, add Hawk and Bear auras to your hand. And that's what it does now. However, they both used to be 2/3s. So Snow Guard was originally released as this 1/2, and then it would swap between having these 2 abilities. If you don't know offhand, Snow Guard gives ignore location abilities until the end of next turn. So it turns off all location abilities. Really, really powerful. You can turn off Limbo with it. You can really, really change things up. And then Snow Guard, Bear. Oh, I think I put Snow Guard Hawk for both. Snowguard Bear says trigger the effect of this location. So kind of similar to how Legion, both these cards kind of work like Legion. However, when these were both 2/3s and you had to play a 1/2 to get them, it was just so freaking efficient. It was a very short time that they had actually done this because the original version was the 1/2 that would just swap between the bear and the hawk form each turn. And that was just so inconsistent because you never knew when you draw it, if you had the right one or what you'd want to do. So then they changed it to this 1/2 that adds the 2/2/3s to your hand. But this was during the Loki meta, so it was played like a lot in Loki decks as just a cheap way to add 2 cards to hand. But when they released this as a 2/3, I feel like people didn't fully, because the meta was so weird and Loki was so dominant, people didn't really grasp that this card was so broken. Again, this was like about 2 years ago, so the power level was a lot less than it is now. 2/3 felt really, really good to play, and just a 1/2 that you could play early and give yourself both of these like relatively cheap options to play out that your opponent has to respect the rest of the game makes it so much stronger than it is now as a 3/3 and a 3/4. Because there's a pretty big investment of playing a 3/3, pretty big investment of playing a 3/4. Like 2/3s, especially back then, were just so easy to slot in on a turn. Let's say you're playing like that Elsa deck, you want to play a 2-drop and then you sneak one of these in to adjust and change the board. But it was very, very short lived this time that they were 2/3s. And I think how powerful this was overshadowed by how dominant Loki was during the meta. Because I was like playing this in every deck that I could because it was just such an efficient, incredible way to get resources, to put pressure on your opponent with very, very limited input to actually just play out a 2/3. And then you always had this option to play those 2/3s the rest of the game. Really, really strong and really powerful. And it's very funny that this card was just so overshadowed around the Loki meta that it kind of got people didn't pay attention to how broken this card when it was. I thought that was really interesting. Moving on to number 3, we have Wave. Wave is also a really neat thing to look back on. So now Wave is the 3/6 that makes cards have a maximum of 4. But this card that was the very first season pass card actually was a 3/3 that had the on reveal next turn cards in both players' hands cost 4. Just straight up, they all cost 4. Which was nuts. I really liked this card back then because you could use it as a ramp card and you could just kind of like push things out. But people pretty quickly started to realize that you could use this as like a combo piece. So on turn 5, you can play out Wave. And then because all cards in each player's hands cost 4, you can't really play more than one card. So you can kind of lock them into just playing one card, basically like an old Sandman level effect of nullifying the final turn if your opponent was trying to play multiple things. Let's say they played something like Sarah, can't really burst anything out. But also very interesting with this. So Sarah, they would be able to play 2 cards, but what was really interesting with Wave was that cost reductions happened after it was set to 4. Then there was a couple of different very powerful decks. It started with Death Wave was a very common thing to call it. But essentially with Death Wave, you would play like a destroy style deck. You'd try and get at least 2 destructions over the course of the game. Then you'd play Wave down on turn 5, and then your opponent would only be able to play 1 card, and you'd be able to play the death that got discounted as well as another card to kind of like lock them out of the game and be able to push even further. This got pushed even further when She-Hulk came out. Because when She-Hulk came out, you could just play Wave on turn 5, so then you'd float 2 energy. As long as you destroyed 4 things, you could play Wave, or after you play the Wave, you could play She-Hulk, Death, and then another card. And usually you'd play like a spread card like Doom to just push damage into multiple different locations and spread it out. And this just became just an incredibly suffocating archetype because there was lots of different ways there. You'd want to play a bunch of cards out. You'd like Sarah and burst your hand on the final turn, maybe like some surfer style combo where you're playing cards out and then surfering them on the final turn. But then Wave would just completely lock it down and have your opponent be able to make an even stronger play than you were trying to do. And Wave is another really interesting one because this version got changed, but then the other version that it made was almost just as broken. Like it was a little bit better, but it was still really, really broken. They changed it to be all cards cost 4 until the next turn, but like exactly 4. All cards would be exactly 4. So it would set the cost at 4 and they couldn't move up and down. But this was still really, really suffocating. you look at a card like Sandman that's able to stop and make your opponent only play one card, and that's been problematic for forever. Wave basically did it on a cheaper card and used to even have all this upside, but even when it got to the point where it was just this, you would just play out Wave on the final turn, then you'd play Doom, then you'd be able to put 5 power in each lane. Your opponent can only play one card, and then as long as you can like figure out a way to get ahead, you'd be able to win. So really funny that Wave was broken twice. Like at first, it was able to be this kind of like combo finisher that restricted your opponent, and then they tried to make it so that you couldn't do the combo thing. But then just being able to restrict your opponent became so powerful that this card became broken again. So really interesting to see a card like Wave that was really kind of released to be like a ramp card, and I always loved playing it as a ramp style card where you'd be able to play Wave on 3 and then play any card that you want on turn 4, but have this like backup or alternative thing that you can do to just completely stuff your opponent up from playing. Really, really interesting to see where Wave ended up and how strong it was back then. And that was just kind of a card that people tend to like. It's like a combo, bring out your onslaught style card. It's more just used for ramp, whereas it used to be absolutely crazy. Moving on, we are now up to our top 2, and in the 2 spot we have Leech. Boy, oh boy. If you played Marvel Snap back then, I guarantee you that this card and the final card are both going to give you some PTSD, because Leech, man, this card was not a problem until it absolutely was, and then it just felt so terrible to play. Leech was actually been very popular a couple of different times. So originally there was like in the later stages of beta, this deck that would just use Leech and Leader to basically leech and turn off your opponent's hand, and then play Leader and copy your opponent's hand on the final turn. And then you'd play just a bunch of efficient, strong cards in the early game to be able to stay on top and then steal what your opponent does. But man, dude, like Thanos came out, and this card just became so much worse to deal with, because people were using things like Lockjaw. So Lockjaw used to just take any card that you would play into it and flip it into your deck. And not only could you play Leech into it to try and find a bigger card out of your deck, but sometimes you'd play like Lockjaw and Wasp on turn 3, and then you just get your entire hand completely shut off on turn 3. And it would just feel terrible. So Leech now, it only goes after 6 drops, but it used to just hit everything in your hand. So it would just shut off anything that you were able to do. And it was such a hard card to play around, because like it doesn't really work that you can just play out the cards that you want to have. Sometimes they're bigger, and sometimes your hand just gets a little bit stuffed up. And if you're really, really relying on combos and Leech comes down, well, now your hand does absolutely nothing, and they're just all terrible cards because you're relying on ongoings or relying on reveals, not just the power that's on the card. This card was such a problem. They tried to change it a bunch of times until it got to where it is now. Leech, they tried to make it so that at the end of your turn it would trigger so that you can't play it into Lockjaw, but then that was still just too annoying. Then they tried to make it so that it only hit on reveals, and then that was like fine for a while, and then like Blink came out, and there was all these ways to like use it and get it, and it still became a problem. So now they have it just target 6 drops and be super strong, because nowadays people don't really rely on 6 drops as their like big power bump, like they maybe used to back when Leech was like originally popular. But man, if you like see Leech and like don't even think about it because maybe just a random card that you've had, maybe you've only been playing for a couple of years, this card used to be just this annoying menace, turn off your fun card. Was a problem, and it was kind of just a weird thing because this card always felt like a problem, but like the stats were never great on it because it is a huge input to be able to play it. And then just the fact that it was lingering there would be a deck that would be able to work in having it come out or being able to play it for a little bit cheaper, or maybe just the rest of the things that we're doing were powerful enough you can afford like a luxury card like this. And it just became so suffocating and really made the meta toxic. A really crazy card, used to be insanely broken, even though it kind of sucks now. And the number one, and I will mention, because I thought about putting Loki on here, but I feel like everyone like remembers how crazy Loki was, so I was really trying to go for ones. This one also kind of hits that level, but I think because it's older, not as many people like will remember this as Loki did. But man, we got to talk about Leader. Leader was originally put in the game as a 6/4 that just copied everything that your opponent did on the final turn. And it was devastating. It was this really nasty, like, trump card that you could play over your opponent and just get access to everything that they're doing. Really nuts. There's some funny things that I used to do with leader. I actually used to say the leader didn't need to get changed and people were just bad at playing around it, but I was also terrible at the game back then. So I don't know. I was definitely defending this card, but the more I look back, man, this card is just so broken. Not only that, but if your opponent, let's say your opponent played like a Black Panther, I guess it happens the similar way now, but like your opponent plays a Black Panther and they have priority, then you copy their bigger Black Panther and then it doubles. Or like Surfer was pretty popular. So then leader would just copy everything that the Surfer did, but then you'd also get the buff 3 drops that they would play, and then those would also trigger their on reveal abilities. Really crazy stuff with old leader. This card was a massive problem, massive problem, and it took them a while to change it. They tried to just bring it down to 6-2 and it made it a little bit better, but it still just felt like this card where it's just like, as long as this exists in the format, you always have to play around it on turn 6, and it just feels terrible to watch your opponent just absolutely steal everything that you're trying to do. I really like what they've done with leader, where it only copies like the biggest card your opponent plays. I think that makes the card way more fair. They try to do a weird Guardians of the Galaxy thing with it, where it was like a 6-7 that copied any card that was played to the right lane. I don't know. That was a really weird one. But man, again, Leech and Leader, I feel like talk to any old heads who played Marvel Snap for a really long time. These are the 2 cards from like the beta and just after beta, right around global release era, that were just such nasty cards to have to deal with at any given time. Just green meanies is what we'd say about them. And man, dude, just remembering the hand coming across and just ruining your day when you're playing against Leech. I still have PTSD to it to this day. But I hope you enjoyed. I really like the Snowguard Hawk and Snowguard Bear thing. If you hadn't thought about that in a while, I even think like people just didn't even realize at the time how strong it was. But I think that Snowguard is a really interesting one that was crazy broken for like a couple of months, but it was overshadowed by other things, and then they got rid of it pretty quickly because I'm sure the stats on the back end were saying it was crazy, which is really good. Arrow was another really funny one, and then man, dude, just remembering the beta days, like these cards just being so much more powerful. Like both these cards would be broken nowadays. And the fact that you put them in your deck when people were playing like Sentinel because it was the best card. People were playing like 3-7 3-7 Maximus because 3-7 was such a crazy amount of power. But then you could just run Devil Dinosaur. Really interesting stuff. And I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane. So let's move on and talk a little bit about what's going on in Marvel Snap this week. So we have a couple cards to talk about from last week, and then we got to talk about Fang Foom. Fang Foom, man, they are just releasing 7-cost cards nowadays. The other 7-cost cards that they had released before Zombie Galacti were all ones that you could like discount to be underneath, or had like a built-in way to gain some extra energy, or like Dormammu, you're just able to summon it. Arishem, you would get the extra energy so you'd be able to play it. But man, Fang Foom, which just, hey, figure out a way to play this similar to Zombie Galacti. Yeah, just figure out a way to play this card. A 7/12 with the ability on reveal, gain the power of front row enemy cards here. Just a monster of an on reveal. If you are going second and there's no kind of tech stuff, and you play Fang Foom on a lane with nothing else in it, your opponent has to have more than 12 power in the back row. Otherwise, Fang Foom will just always win because it's going to eat and copy the exact power of those front 2 cards. As long as they don't have 12 power behind it, you are going to win that lane. Now, is this card going to be good? It's hard to say. I don't think so. What's interesting is like this almost feels like how powerful Shu Lao is as far as like the amount of power you get on a singular card, but Shu Lao just costs 5. I guess you have to like build it up over the course of the game, but you generally want to do that anyway. But just having to play this just on a single lane, it's interesting. It could just be like a big like Trump style card to just win a lane. Maybe like in something like Clog, right? Like you clog one lane and you scam one lane somehow, and then you just slam Fang Foom. Shang-Chi is probably like its lowest play rate it's ever been. So if this card's going to come out and be pretty effective, I think now might be the time. Shadow King is quite relevant, but it's still 12 power that's getting slammed down into a lane. And usually you're going to be playing this in the final turn, so they kind of have to play a little bit of a guessing game there. The biggest problem is just, it costs 7, right? I wonder if like Wave is going to be something that is interesting. I kind of want to play like Wave and with Fang Foom. Maybe you start looking at it in um maybe start looking at it in like those ramp style lists with like something like Dragon Lord pulling Fin Fang Foom is pretty crazy. Obviously, like this card's pretty nasty in Hella. It's it's really good in Hella. That Hella deck, because it does one of every cost, is pretty much the biggest card that you can get of anything. So being able to pull it, it's going to win the lane most likely that it gets dropped in. I mean, maybe even just like a Black Knight style deck, right? Like, kind of interesting to think about running Black Knight, trying to target this with Lady Sif, and then you Ghost Rider it, and then I tell you what, you're probably going to be winning that dang old lane. I tell you what, you're probably going to be winning that lane there. Interesting card. It's expensive. I think that playing it out for 7 energy is probably rarely going to happen. I do think it's probably going to be something that's either discarded and revived, or maybe try to get pulled out with Dragon Lord, or maybe tried to get waved out. Maybe there is a world where a deck wants to run like Magic and Luna Snow already, so you can kind of just afford to play it. But without like influencing this in some way, I can't really see you wanting to play it for 7 energy. 7 energy is just so much, and you have to get to 7 energy either by extending the game or doing something else. So an interesting card. I do wonder if something like this makes Black Knight quite a bit better, or just something that wants to do like a Lady Sif Ghost Rider style thing that's maybe hasn't been found, because this card is such a huge payoff. It's very, very easy to target with Lady Sith, because there's very few cards that are there in the 6-drop slot, and it allows you to play some other things. I don't know. We'll see. Pretty interesting. Maybe even just like a Khonshu Ghost Rider Hella style list. I think in pretty much any Hella list, you're going to want to be running this card. So I don't want to call it just a Hella card, because there's other interesting things. I kind of want to play with Wave, but very interesting, very big, very powerful boss style card. How competitive is going to be? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to put Hella on the spot, but this is a card that you will like to have in your collection, because there's something to be said about a card that can just like essentially win a lane on its own. Really independent of what your opponent's doing outside of like Iron Man stuff, because anything that your opponent does in the front row that's really big, you can just steal it. Like think about like big man spider combo style decks. Like they just have a man spider in a lane that's 1,000 power, and you play Fin Fang Foom on it, you get the 1,000 power. So interesting. Be cool to see what happens with this card. Not exactly sure how powerful it will be outside of resing it from getting discarded, but I'm excited to mess around with it. Let's talk about the cards that came out last week. We have a couple here for you. The first one is going to be Lin Lie Iron Fist, the 2 energy 2 power that says on reveal, add the Sword of Fu Ji to another location. Got what that does. It says if Lin Lie Iron Fist is here, he has +7 power. So you kind of get a 2/4 worth of value that gets spread out, and then if you can put those together, you get a added benefit of +7 power. And stats are pretty reasonable. We always look at top 50% infinite for the last 7 days, and we're looking at 0.1 cube a game, 52% win rate. Good players are playing this at a decent clip. About 8% of the ladder has Lin Lie in it. I think it's cool. It's interesting. I really like it with Cerebro too. I do think it makes that deck better, which is kind of weird because you're not really using it for its ability. But I also was really kind of guided towards using the Ancient one with this. So you get the Ancient one, and then you get that spell that copies the ongoing. Combine these two into the same location, then you play that spell. You can actually change Lin Lie Iron Fist ability into this ongoing, and it will just hit itself. So if you get a full lane, and you're able to play the Ancient One spell into it to copy that ongoing onto the other cards, you're able to then get the Iron Fist up to +21 power. So it's being 23 power in that lane. It can really fight for that lane in itself. You can run something like Hydra Stomper is another way to use the Ancient One. So there were some interesting fun decks that I've liked with it. Also, just any deck that's running like Madam Web can maybe get some value out of this card. Pretty darn cool. Really like it. surprising. It's a little bit better than I expected it to be and a little bit more play than I expected it to be. Very well designed, very fun card. And then next up we have Dragon Lord, which I think is a really, really cool card. I love these, bigger, crazier RNG Fiesta style things that some of these decks can do. It's decent stats. It's at about 8.5% of decks. Positive cube rate, positive win rate, just over average. But it is the 5/5 that has on reveal, put a card from your hand here. Very, very simple design, very clear cut as a way kind of like Jubilee to just kind of try and buff up and pull big cards out and cheat them out. Again, is going to be really, really good with Fang Foom. I think that those ramp style decks also probably want to mess around with it, right? It's just a giant card that can win a lane. It's a card that you are almost always going to be able to play either through something like Blink. Like, actually, a really interesting thing I didn't really think about with Fang Foom is how it works with Blink, because you can blink a 6 cost into this, and that's pretty nasty. Like, there's powerful 6 drops. Maybe you're running like a Doom or something like that in your deck, and you play out a Doom, and then you blink it into a Fang Foom, and you just annihilate that lane, and you get 13 power somewhere else and 5 power somewhere else. I didn't really think about the blink or more ramp style of it, but other really cool ways to think about this card. And again, Dragon Lord is something that's probably going to work in with that. Really, really fun. Dragon Lord also a great blink target. You can Dragon Lord out a card and then pull a 6 drop from your deck, or maybe a 7 drop if you have freaking Fang Foom in there. So really, really good, really solid addition. Love that everyone got access to this big, powerful card for free, and I hope that you have been enjoying it. And then to finish out the show today, just a couple of things. High Voltage ended today. Make sure to spend all of your volts that you have. The store will be open for a couple more days, so if you're hearing this and you forgot that it was ending, make sure to jump in, log in, and get those volts spent so you don't lose them. And then a little bit of self-promotion I wanted to throw in here. I did, like, this year I'm really trying to do different things with content, as you can see with like this show that I'm doing. But one thing that I've wanted to do for a while, and I finally pulled the trigger on getting the first one out, is an idea called Overexplained. I got this from a couple other like card gamers and different card games. And then I saw Kriparian do it in the Bazaar when I was playing the Bazaar a lot. And I just thought it was a really interesting style of content. Essentially, how Overexplained works. A lot of times you'll see my deck highlight videos. I'll either be streaming on them, or if it's the Tuesday new card video, I'm doing it offline and then recording it and then uploading it. I noticed that in those offline recordings, I talked quite a bit more because I didn't have like chat there, and I hadn't been streaming for multiple hours at a time. So I'm just fresh, and I'm always trying to say something because I'm talking about it. And I started to quite like how I was doing that. I tried to even like use that to talk a little bit more in stream. But I thought it would be very interesting to kind of like go to the extreme of how much I talk while trying to do those recorded videos. So essentially what I'm going to be doing with the Overexplained series, I'm going to take a pretty meta relevant deck. So this was a Victoria Hand Moon Girl style deck. I've played plenty of them before with things like Bastion, and you have Vic Hand and you have Quinjet to be able to boost things up. And it's just a very, very solid deck in the meta right now. I jump on ladder and I play it for 10 games. You get to see the wins, you get to see the losses. And what I try and do is just explain every single turn, my thought process for why I'm doing things, what I'm anticipating and thinking about from the opponent, how I'm planning out future turns based on what top decks I could potentially get, when I'm deciding to snap, why I'm deciding to snap, what do I do when my opponent decides to snap, all that. So I'm going to guess if you're at the end of this video, you probably like me and you probably like me talking. So definitely give a check out to Overexplained. Give some support to that series. I'm excited to keep doing it in the future. And that's going to bring us to the end of Bynx Bants today for January 19th. Super appreciate it. I love doing this, and it's very, very fun to talk about Marvel Snap and take it down a trip down memory lane. I would love for you in the comments to tell me what card do you remember back from like when you first started playing that is way different or maybe was way stronger back then. I would love to hear it in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe to keep supporting the series. Hear that? It's the song. See you later.
Bynx, Bynx, Bynx. I hope you like the vibe. Bynx, Bynx. Like and subscribe. Bynx, Bynx. I hope you like the vibe. Bynx, Bynx. Like and subscribe.